Hey guy, breaking news. Gun shop counters are heating up again, and once more, the usual voices in the media are throwing a fit. Just a few months back, the racks were full and barely touched. Now those same shelves are near empty, and the folks up in Washington, D.C., who've long pushed for stricter regulations, are scrambling to figure out what's stirring the pot. So, is this just another wave of panic buying? Or is there something deeper going on? Could Donald Trump's 2025 policy roadmap be the spark that supporters of the Second Amendment have been waiting on? In today's video, we're digging into what's really behind this fresh wave of firearm demand, how Trump's proposed changes are quietly rallying millions of gun owners across the country, and why some of the same people who've long pushed for tighter rules are starting to feel the cultural tide turning. Things really kicked into gear once the dust settled after the election. I've been talking with dealers from coast to coast, from the sun-baked shops down in Arizona to the counters in western Pennsylvania, and they're all saying the same thing. Weekday traffic holds steady. But the minute a new rumor flares up about ATF shakeups or federal policy tweaks, weekend foot traffic blows up. But this time, it's not just blind panic, it's calculated. Buyers are locking in solid carry pistols, grabbing bulk boxes of 9mm, and scooping up spare parts before prices jump. Online sellers are logging record sales on everything from red dot optics to small parts like Glock firing pin springs. A few manufacturers are already posting stronger first quarter numbers than they did in last year's second quarter, and we're not even through spring yet. If your favorite online shop's starting to show more out-of-stock listings than usual, drop a comment and let us know what's disappearing in your neck of the woods. Are your local stores able to keep up, or are things flying off the shelves faster than they can restock? So, what's lighting the fuse this time around? It all ties back to what might be the biggest proposed change in federal firearms oversight in years. Donald Trump's plan to move the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives out from under the Department of Justice and place it under the Treasury Department. Now, that's more than just a paperwork shuffle. That's a shift in how the whole agency runs. It would put tighter limits on the ATF's ability to roll out sudden policy changes and help prevent it from catching gun owners off guard with last-minute rulings or vague interpretations. No more surprise brace decisions. No more back and forth on what counts as a receiver. With clearer boundaries and more oversight, firearm owners are feeling something that's been hard to come by lately: stability. And that's changing how folks are buying. Instead of panic hoarding, people are putting their money into well-made gear. American-built bolt-action rifles are starting to outsell foreign imports. Stripped AR lowers are moving again, not out of fear, but because people are feeling more confident the rules won't flip on a dime. Right alongside that, Trump signed an executive order instructing the Department of Justice to go through every gun regulation on the books and scrap anything that doesn't line up with a stricter reading of the Second Amendment. The bigger media voices were quick to call it reckless, but for folks in the firearm world, the effect was felt right away. Wait times for suppressors began to drop. People who had been holding off on customizing their firearms are back at the workbench tuning pistols, doing fresh builds, and getting creative again. When federal pressure eases up, the firearm community tends to come alive. And this isn't just talk. We're already seeing gear that had been pushed to the sidelines start to make a comeback. One example, the Franklin Armory RS-7. This was the firearm the ATF tried to shut down back in 2019 by calling it a short-barreled shotgun. Franklin took them to court and won. Now, with Second Amendment energy rising under Trump's direction, firearms like the RS-7 are finding their way back onto the market and back into the hands of folks who've been waiting a long time for this kind of shift. This platform comes chambered in either 5.56 NATO or 300 Blackout. It's available with a 7-inch or 12-inch barrel and uses a straight-cut rifled bore, smartly sidestepping classification under the National Firearms Act. Add in an optional binary trigger, and what you've got is a compact, high-performance setup that's well-suited for close quarters or home defense. No tax stamp, no long wait, and no surprise letters from the ATF. Priced at right around $1,100, it's become a top pick not just for gearheads and collectors, but for everyday shooters walking through the door and asking for it by name. And they're not just window shopping, they're walking out with receipts in hand. Now let's talk about something that's got folks buzzing: National Concealed Carry Reciprocity. Predictably, the usual voices in the gun control lobby are sounding the alarm, saying it'll turn places like Times Square into a free-for-all. But most everyday gun owners see it as plain common sense. You can drive across the entire country on one driver's license, but your legal right to carry a firearm can vanish the second you cross a state line. That's not public safety, that's politics. And folks living in restrictive states like New York and New Jersey can feel the ground shifting. They're already getting ready, picking up slimline pistols, locking in training sessions, and ordering Kydex holsters before supplies get tight. Subcompact 9mm handguns from makers like Smith & Wesson, Springfield Armory, and Sig Sauer are flying off the shelves so fast, some manufacturers are running double shifts just to keep up. Even holster makers are under pressure. Leather shops are running months behind on custom orders. Ammunition's tightening up again, too. Defensive loads like Gold Dot and Federal HST are being rationed. Some counters are limiting buyers to 1 box apiece. The bill hasn't even cleared the Senate yet, but the buzz is already putting folks into motion. Bottom line, folks aren't waiting around for permission. They're getting ready now. Meanwhile, while national carry continues to dominate the headlines, there's another development quietly making waves through the gun community, a push to restore Second Amendment rights to nonviolent felons who've turned their lives around. Gun control organizations are sounding alarms, but let's be honest here. This isn't about arming dangerous criminals. It's about offering a second chance to folks who made minor legal missteps 20 years ago, people who bounced a check, got tangled up in tax trouble, or faced nonviolent charges back in the early 2000s. Many of them have gone on to raise families, hold steady jobs, and make good on their debts to society. Now, for the first time in years, they're being given the opportunity to take personal responsibility for their own protection again. That shift is already showing up in current buying trends. Gun shops are seeing a noticeable rise in demand for dependable pump-action shotguns, 4-inch barreled revolvers, and practical carbines meant for home defense. These aren't black market firearms. They are simple, reliable tools trusted by working-class Americans who want nothing more than a fair shake at safeguarding their homes and loved ones. We're also seeing a strong revival in the custom gun building community. While the previous administration worked to restrict the home-built market under rules targeting so-called ghost guns, those restrictions are now hanging by a thread in court. And with Donald Trump's legal team reportedly drafting new guidance, many builders expect a return to the long-standing view that an unfinished frame, or lower, is just a piece of plastic or metal until it's been machined. That possibility lit a fire in the builder community. Within 48 hours of the news breaking, jig kits and router accessories were back-ordered just about everywhere. Sales numbers that would normally take 3 months to hit were passed in just over 1 week. And despite what some critics might say, the home builders I've met are anything but reckless. They keep detailed logs, serialize their lowers, and would fully cooperate with law enforcement if ever presented with a legitimate warrant. What they won't do is give up their right to build a lawful firearm for personal use without having to register it with a federal database. That spirit lawful, self-reliant, and quietly firm is the very heart of what James Madison had in mind when he helped frame the Second Amendment. No asterisk, no caveats. And that spirit, after years of being pushed to the margins, is starting to gain ground again. Thanks in large part to Trump's Supreme Court picks, the Bruen decision put a firm check on arbitrary gun laws. It confirmed that the right to carry doesn't end at your doorstep, and it forced states to justify restrictions based on real historical precedent tied to the Constitution. Most simply can't meet that bar. As a result, we're now seeing a domino effect across the country. State-level bans on magazine capacity, mandatory waiting periods, and no resale rules are starting to fold under the weight of legal challenges. Gun owners are taking notice, and they're not just speaking up at the ballot box. They're speaking with their wallets. Standard capacity magazines are now in higher demand than some of the latest tech gadgets. Manufacturers that once held back on innovation are showing up at SHOT Show with their shoulders squared, launching new rifle platforms and design upgrades that haven't hit the market in years. Now let's shift gears for a minute and talk about tariffs. As expected, outlets like The Guardian are ringing the alarm bells, saying these trade measures will wreck the firearm industry, but they are missing the broader picture. Yes, putting a fee on raw materials like copper and steel does bump up production costs, but it's also reignited domestic manufacturing. In fact, several mid-size machine shops in places like Texas and Ohio have already announced plans to expand. They're cutting AR bolts, machining receivers, and turning out solid parts from American billets. That means more skilled labor jobs and more products proudly stamped made in the United States. Sure, nobody's thrilled about paying an extra $25 for a range bag, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to the $100 processing fees that states like California slap onto every legal transfer. When the same lawmakers tax background checks for ammunition and then turn around and complain that tariffs are hurting working folks, they're handing pro-Second Amendment companies a golden opportunity to connect with their base. Even brands that usually lean on overseas suppliers aren't folding, they're adapting. One well-known cable lock maker signed a deal with a steel foundry in Wisconsin just 2 weeks after Trump announced a 90-day pause on certain tariffs. Is it more expensive? No question. But now they're marketing their products as 100% American forged, and firearm owners, despite what the caricatures might suggest, are more than willing to spend a little extra to back companies that aren't tied to foreign regimes that jail clergy or float surveillance balloons over Iowa. Meanwhile, the usual media outlets are back on the beat, claiming that more legally armed citizens will only lead to more violence. But even their own data tells a different story. The worst spikes in violent crime didn't happen in well-armed counties. They hit places that defunded police, tied prosecutors' hands, and shut down gun shops during lockdowns. By contrast, rural counties with high concealed carry rates are reporting robbery numbers at lows not seen in decades. According to crime statistics from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, lawfully armed citizens stop violent criminals thousands of times every year, far more often than the handful of tragic events the major news outlets can't seem to stop recycling. And while stories of everyday folks stopping a threat with a firearm rarely make the evening news, they sure travel by word of mouth. And those stories are having an effect. They're inspiring more and more Americans to get trained and get ready. And we're not just talking about bearded range guys here. It's single moms, it's trauma nurses, it's long-haul truck drivers, real people who know that calling 911 doesn't bring help in seconds. And this isn't your run-of-the-mill panic buy either. Back in the day, folks would just grab whatever handgun or rifle was still hanging on the wall. But now, they're thinking it through. Buyers are choosing ammunition with strong supply chains, 9mm, 5.56, 12-gauge buckshot, and picking up serious gear, night sights, weapon-mounted lights, plate carriers, and medical kits. Firearms training centers from Florida all the way up to the mountains of Idaho are booked solid well into the fall. This ain't fear, it's preparation. And a country full of trained, equipped citizens doesn't need to fire a single round to serve as a powerful deterrent to tyranny. Now, of course, anti-gun groups are claiming that this new wave of legal firearm sales will somehow flood neighborhoods with stolen weapons. But here's what they won't say. Most guns used in crimes are already stolen, often lifted from locked vehicles, because carry laws in some states force lawful owners to leave their firearm behind. National reciprocity would let responsible carriers travel from Maine to Missouri without having to disarm at every state line. That alone would slash the number of vehicle break-ins. But the same groups who sound the alarm about stolen guns are the ones blocking the very fix that could help prevent it. Truth is, reason left that debate a long time ago. Still, the industry rolls forward. Ammunition plants are hiring. Holster makers are expanding to second and third shifts. Small-town banks across the Midwest are funding new indoor ranges at record speed. And after years of activist investors blacklisting gun companies, venture capital is finally flowing back in fueling businesses that can't build rifles fast enough to keep up with demands. Even the big box stores that once thought about cutting down their firearm sections after the 2020 riots have quietly reversed course. When they saw their customers spending money elsewhere, profits started speaking louder than editorials ever could. And while all of this is building momentum, federal law enforcement priorities are shifting too. Under the Trump administration, the Department of Justice has stepped away from the flawed idea that gun violence is a public health crisis and has returned focus where it belongs, on actual criminals, not on carbines and suppressors. That soundbite from the Surgeon General calling firearms a public health threat? Gone overnight. In its place are new efforts focused on counseling and mental health resources, not confiscation schemes or broad bans. Police morale has already started to climb. Chiefs across the country know they're dealing with an administration that treats them like partners, not like walking lawsuits. When officers out in the field feel that kind of support, case clearance rates go up. And believe it or not, putting actual criminals behind bars tends to reduce repeat offenses a whole lot quicker than banning 30-round magazines ever did. Now, about those tariffs that some say are making safety gear unaffordable, there's a silver lining there too. American lockmakers are already lobbying for targeted carve-outs and tax incentives that reward domestic production. In fact, there's a bill on the table right now that would let you deduct the full price of any safety accessory built here in the United States. If it passes, you could buy a top-shelf American-made firearm lock, write it off at tax time, and still come out ahead compared to buying a cheaper import. When free market policy lines up with common-sense legislation, American manufacturing always finds its footing. Even the import market is adjusting without skipping a beat. Turkey's still holding strong as a go-to source for solid, affordable scatterguns. And Austria keeps cranking out the dependable Glock lineup like clockwork. But thanks to new trade agreements, some imported sporting arms are sliding into lower duty brackets as long as final assembly is done right here on American soil. That means more local jobs, faster turnaround on service and warranty work, and a whole lot less of that smug pushback from critics who get worked up over anything with a tactical rail. Meanwhile, anti-Second Amendment groups are waving around polling numbers, trying to claim that Americans are scared of rising crime and ready to give up their rights. What they're not saying on purpose is that those same surveys show record numbers of first-time buyers from communities that have long been underrepresented in the firearm world. Still not convinced? Head over to any indoor range in Atlanta on a Thursday night. You won't see the stereotype they like to paint. You'll see hardworking women, black professionals, single moms, and recent college grads all stepping forward to claim their right to self-protection. This isn't about holding on to the past. It's about expanding freedom. The right to bear arms isn't just some old idea, it's a civil right. And more Americans every single day are stepping up to claim it for themselves. By now, the plan set in motion by President Trump for 2025 is coming into clear view. It's not just about putting the brakes on federal overreach from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. It's a layered approach, smart, deliberate, and focused on restoring balance. He's pushing for national reciprocity, working to roll back unconstitutional limits on home-built firearms, appointing judges who take the plain text of the Second Amendment seriously, and laying the foundation for a real manufacturing comeback right here in the United States. This ain't just policy, it's a full shift in how the government views law-abiding gun owners. And that kind of clarity, it goes a long way. After years of bouncing between new rules and political whiplash, folks are finally feeling steady enough to invest in their gear and training again. Personally, I've been picking up small rifle primers whenever I can get my hands on them, and I finally pulled the trigger pun fully intended on that optics-ready CZ pistol I've had my eye on since last fall. How about you? Looking at a new red dot? Maybe thinking about upgrading your plate carrier? Or finally, bringing home that lever-action rifle you've been daydreaming about for deer season? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear what's on your list. And if you found this video helpful, do me a favor. Give it a thumbs up, pass it along to your shooting buddies, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Appreciate you sticking around. I'll see you out at the range.